All right. Well, hello and welcome to the Blackened Earth review, discussion, roundtable, post-campaign analysis. Welcome Twitch chat as well.
Hey, Twitch.
Some might say the one with the most feelings on the campaign. Oh, so we heard. There is a placeholder square there that is for when Michael does arrive. But yes. I thought I would kick us off with a brief overview of all the chapters so we can remember what has happened, what's gone on.
This is helpful because
Yeah.
it's been it was a long journey.
It was a long journey. Let me just get the book up as well, just in case I forget. But so we all started when you guys got the lift on the Harbinger of Trouble into the realm of life itself, Gairan. You had a fun trip through the jungle. Then you got attacked by some Skaven. Then you were on foot. You went through the jungle. Then you went through the Ghoul Mere. You met Chard Yu. You ended up fighting your way into Greywater Fastness. And I think that was it. You met Corporal Steelwater. And that was it. Chapter 2 was the price of victory. That started with a bang with the explosion at the forge. You all had an exciting time putting out fires and saving people. And you found those Skaven bombs. You followed this fleshy map to different locations, culminating in where Gulban Coldrock got attacked. You met for the first time. You then went.
Like a little chap.
He was a good guy.
I don't see any reason to distrust him.
He had some spicy rhetoric. Then you had a council meeting where you were questioned on what happened. You were then asked by Anastasia Everlark to help her escort that injured dryad, out of the city.
Oh yeah.
Actually, no, that happened first, and then you went to the council because they'd seen you.
Yeah.
You were charged with fixing the issue because Paylok was like, he wants the heads of the people responsible. And you investigated
Probably should have just done
that. You investigated the farm which had the corn cultists in, and the Korgoth, where Khazal unfortunately lost his life.
Shit.
And you managed to solve the corn cultist issue, or so Gulban and Astrid Tavia had hoped you would have thought. Chapter 3 was the Riven Bridge. You were tasked with escorting Captain Heinz to the Riven Bridge, the Holfast Bridge, to repair it. You get attacked by a tree lord called Oak Shadow, gone a bit crazy. Chard Yu turns up and invites you along to go and chat to the Sylvaneth in his Soulbound Grove. After some fun travels, you get there and it's completely destroyed by toxic runoff. You follow the march of the Sylvaneth to Brinner's farm. You manage to stop the attack. Mid-attack, I should say. Then you were tasked with hiring a diplomatic body to go and negotiate an end to the conflict at Holfast Bridge. We all know how that turned out.
Been fine, didn't it? We successfully negotiated a peace. Everyone went home, and then we had cake.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how I remember
it. And now you live peacefully in the West Bank together.
Whoa, spicy.
The next chapter was the one that I invented. the Black Hog Down, where you where you went out and recovered some items which Gulban was expecting. It turns out those items were weapons for killing Sylvaneth. You fought off some Doom Wheels, the anti-hurricane Doom Wheels.
They were great.
Yeah, I believe you spoke to Chard Yu again at that point, and found out he wasn't completely on the turn. You get chased by some corn people. You make it back to the city. And then you're tasked by Ondran to investigate Astrid Tavia in her tower. You discover that she is a corn cultist as well. And then you go to the Greycat Western Barracks, find out they're corny as well. You manage to kill Astrid and Captain what's-his-face of the Grey Caps. Hand that evidence over to the council, and they say go and arrest good old Gulban Coldrock. So you go to the forge where he is at, and summarily throw him into the forge.
Yeah.
It was a fine way to go.
Yeah. And then the final chapter, obviously, you went through the different threats, dealing with the Sylvaneth attack, the Skaven attack, and the remnants of the Khorne cultists, culminating in mostly defeating the Khorne cultists, defeating the Skaven fully, and resolving a peace deal with a truce with the Sylvaneth, and the eventual prosperity and positive progressive change of the city in general. So, my question to you is, and I want you to show me with a thumb up or down.
All right.
Did you enjoy the adventure?
Hey! I guess one for the listeners there.
Alex, we didn't see we didn't see the direction of your thumb.
Oh no, chat isn't. Sorry, Discord chat isn't in the broadcast. Allow me to. It's a big yes from me.
Oh, big
Sorry,
thumbs
I'm
up.
keeping my hands busy during our discussion. Normally, whenever I have any kind of detailed conversation, I have to keep my hands busy somehow. So I'm painting.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, my camera isn't focusing, and I don't really understand why.
That's because you have a blur on. It doesn't work well with Discord.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll try and get close enough so that you can see through the blur.
Oh, well. Wow, that's
Yeah.
more of Alex's thumb than I thought I'd ever see.
Yeah,
HD fucking thumb therapy on Twitch today for free. This is your free trial.
All right. Good.
Interesting binary choice you give us there. Ollie, I suppose it's probably it's like thumbs. It's like more like a thumbs up with diagonal, a thumbs up with reservations, or as I'm sure we're going to get into, a thumbs up.
Look
with
at this.
Various pieces of commentary.
Yeah.
It was definitely a net positive for me, so I stuck with an up.
I always think it's interesting to do a binary just to get the overall framing, because we're probably going to talk about a lot of nuanced stuff, but overall, sounds like we all enjoyed it, which is good.
But the way you phrased it is also. I also took that into consideration because you said that you enjoy it, and I did, because it was fun and I enjoy doing this in general, like with you guys. But if you had asked, was it a good one, as in like a good campaign? That's a different question.
Oh well, maybe we could do that again then. So, do we think it's a good campaign? Yes or no? Oh,
It's a no from me. So no, I don't think it was a good campaign.
It wasn't. There were good points, and the setting was good. The setting was actually quite good. I enjoyed that much. And And the story behind it all was interesting. It was definitely more interesting than what we had last campaign. Like story wise, I thought it was better.
Well,
But
let's
I'll
talk about
rush.
first what we did like about it, and also this is probably our last Soulbound campaign, so I'm happy to talk about stuff we didn't like. We liked in Soulbound as well, but people probably watching this wanting to know about Blackened Earth in particular.
Yeah, that's fair.
I didn't give you my judgment.
Oh yeah.
I think on balance, it's maybe like for the campaign, taking aside like what you and we did with it, I would say maybe like a solid 6.
Yeah.
Because I think because of the inescapable linearity of feel, not even necessarily linearity of what we did, because I feel like you injected quite a lot of choice and all the rest of it, but like the content was very laid out in a row, and there wasn't a lot you could do with that. And if that's what you want, that's fine. But I think we ground against that a few times, and we'll probably discuss that. But
yeah, before I go into like that topic, because I do have a lot to say about that. Overall, like I said, I think that the story was good. I think there was more of a sense of like things happening, like serious things happening, and things that you need to deal with. Which, again, I know I'm comparing it to the other campaign, but just to give you a bit of an idea of what I'm basing it on. But last campaign, it felt a bit like scattered, whereas to its benefit in a way, this was more focused on like the conflict there was with all other issues with the cult and everything happening at the same time, and that was good. I actually enjoyed that, and I like the way it was written. I like the whole like things happening within the council, the war with the Sylvaneth, and how that came to be, and the reasons they had. So yeah, again, there was a solid foundation as far as I'm concerned. And
Yeah.
if it was that much, if it was like a book, if I was reading a book, I would have preferred reading this. Because I did enjoy the story. But I'll keep the rest for later.
I think this, when I read it, I think the setting seemed really cool. It was like the themes that were standing out were, the workers versus the capitalists, the factory owners and the business owners, and how it's driving ecological disasters, and the tree people are literally like fighting against it. Kind of Treebeard versus Isengard, which I thought was really, really cool. Yeah.
I thought the setting was really cool. I think it had a lot of potential in the setting. I think, and it was a very political adventure. I thought that was really cool, and I think it made us explore our own opinions on what happens when a bunch of adventuring heroes go in on the side of the incumbent power, and they arrive, and I think their natural feeling is to be like, well, we must maintain the status quo. That's here. That's the side we're on. And by the end of it, or even by maybe the middle of it, we were a bit like, oh, is that what we should be doing? And I think this is both a positive and a negative. And then it got far too complex for that, because it was sort of like, oh, these are the bad guys. Well, there's no bad guys. Oh, they're all bad guys. These are, there's the city that are doing bad things without care, and then there's the tree people who are like, fuck them then, let's just kill them all. And then somewhere mixed all up in amongst it, you've got, was this sort of really caused by a chaos cult? And there was a lot of complexity there, and I think that had some positives and some negatives to it, but it was a good old hodgepodge. For me, I think the ethics of the setting was a really cool thing to explore. So I thought that was pretty cool. Multiple threats and factions was cool. Skaven just rocking up at the end, being like, and now we're invading the city, was great fun from a gameplay perspective. Not sure they were, but not sure potentially it was necessary for them to be like, yeah, and also there's a giant portal for Skaven coming in now just for a laugh. But it was fun for a variety's sake.
Yeah. Did you guys, when you discovered because you went back to the site where the Harbinger of Trouble crashed, but it was missing. Did you guys even consider that the Skaven had nicked it? And
no, not really.
There
wasn't anything that pointed towards there being Skaven, at least not as far as I could tell.
Apart from the warpstone tool that you found at the bottom of that crater.
I don't. No.
Do you remember? Because Klaus wanted it and you kept it.
Yeah.
I think you missed that session.
That really was the only thing, and it wasn't. At least for me, it wasn't that big of a clue. And if it was the only one. Which, if it's going to be something that big near the end, then pepper things throughout. Don't just give me one point of reference and then be like, no, I told you. You didn't really, though.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of meta knowledge that you would know that the Skaven are sort of technological scroungers and dumpster divers. Yeah,
so
exactly.
But even if you had said, and the Skaven probably took it, my brain probably wouldn't have gone, oh, they're probably going to invade the city with it. That would be quite a jump for someone who was perfectly familiar.
Yeah.
I do have to say,
it was fun to see it come back. It was fun. I enjoyed that.
Because I don't want to forget. I do agree with a lot of what you said, Milo, before. However, the one thing that, and actually this is something I didn't like, so I'll keep that until later.
It's very easy to flow from one into the other, isn't it? Because
it is.
There are a lot of things that were not straight up positive or negative. They were complex, or they had upsides and downsides.
Yeah,
and
it's hard
talking about the downsides. That when you start talking about one of the upsides of them, you're like, oh, but also
it's not even just that. It's because like I said, it does have a lot of upsides, but each and every one of those upsides comes with a lot of downsides. So it's really hard to just mention the upsides and then be like, not be like, but yeah, we'll segment them, and I'll wait until later.
Well, maybe we can. I mean, I guess as a GM, the stuff that I liked the setting. I did like the multiple faction thing. I think I kind of said to you, a couple of you guys already privately, but I would have, if I had to do it again, I would have done a more open world style thing where those factions are always on the table and you have agency to choose who you investigate and who you stop. And obviously, if you wanted to make peace with the Sylvaneth and put all your effort into that, I would have made that 100% achievable. You wouldn't have had this great big, climax at the end, but that's the price you pay for having an open world.
You're making it very hard for me not to say what I wanted to say.
I mean, yeah, I just did the same thing as you guys, I guess.
It is hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to think of anything purely positive, because I think for a lot of it, I was feeling like I was just setting up pins in a bowling alley for you guys to knock down, and that's about it, really. Which is why I had to be like, look, I'm going to make my own chapter. I don't care if it extends the campaign by, another month. I just want to have some fun game design and stuff, and so yeah.
Works perfectly for me because I was able to join again. So
that is true. Yeah.
And like I say, there's a downside to everything.
Hey.
Got him.
Hey.
Well, that's enough. See ya.
And I'm glad we had 2 Sylvaneth as well, and then 2 Dwarden, and then Klaus was definitely an industrial type magic user as well. So we had a nice split in the party.
There's a good variety for sure. I don't think there was a
sides.
single personality that was similar, right? We had the peace-loving, Sylvaneth. I was going to say Dwarden for some reason. We had the murderous Sylvaneth. We had the techie. We had the other Dwarden who was obsessed with, his own agenda. and yeah, we had like Klaus. I feel like Klaus was kind of like the midpoint where he could push and pull everyone. So he had like a foot in everyone's. Yeah, it was a good mix of personalities.
Well, maybe we should talk about stuff that we didn't like then. So
I'm gonna have to mention it. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
No, go on, Daryl, because you've been holding on to it.
Because I've been really holding on to it. So, with what Milo said, like I said, I completely agree with it. I like the fact that there wasn't like a good side and a bad side. You thought there was a good side, and you thought there was a bad side, and then you investigate and you find things out. But what I hated then is that it starts out with good and bad, good and evil, at least in our eyes, and then we come to realize that maybe things aren't the way that we think, and like you start to see different things, and then it just forces you into one side, and the reason that it gives you is because of like the war song. And I know this is like a lore thing, but it still affected the campaign from my point of view. But like it tells you like the war song, like they're on a mission, they can't really get out of it unless they're like the supreme ones. So it did kind of make them the bad guys at that point because they weren't listening to reason, they didn't give a shit. Sorry, but yeah, it all just boiled down to good and bad once again. And yeah, there were ways out if you talked to like charge you and everything instead of fighting him. But I mean, it kind of also is the obvious decision at that point. It, it all the interest that the campaign had about not one side being good and every side having its downsides was completely thrown away just to have that climactic battle happening in like the city walls, and it kind of messed the entire thing up. And obviously, like the turning point, everyone knows that by now. That was forced, really, really forced. So it just added to it. It's just you have a great idea, you have a great base, but I feel like whoever actually created the campaign and wrote everything down, they didn't know how to flesh that out. At least it didn't feel like it.
If I could just build on what you're saying there, Daryl, it actually was quite collected some of my thoughts, which is it feels a bit like this adventure started with how do we have the siege of Amblegard, and they work backwards. And as it happens, that's exactly what it felt like, because there was no other outcome. And I think if I look back on a campaign, how long were we playing this campaign for? Like 6 months ish.
More.
This one was.
Where did we start?
This one was actually. I think I looked at this earlier because I was looking on when our first YouTube video went out. It's longer than that. I think it's closer to 8 months.
So
I'm gonna say, I think
8. I'm gonna sound like a whiny bitch now. 8 months of my life, and what do I have to show for it? But no impact on what happened.
Yeah.
I had a lovely time every Tuesday evening, but like we're going to talk about it being railroady, but and you could tell me otherwise that this all could have played out differently. But even though there were points at which it seemed like we were doing something, it was more just like we were holding back the ending from happening for as long as possible. And then we arrived there, and there were fun bits in that. But yeah, like, and such is the trouble of any published adventure, or perhaps one that only wrote one ending.
Well, I showed you guys the other endings, but the problem is it was all just to do with.
But
it was all to do with
endings.
It was all to do with Doom.
That's epilogue.
Yeah, which
that's not
really
an ending.
Like...
For the benefit of anyone watching this, and also for me because I've forgotten, why don't we hear from Olly again about that alternative ending, how it works, and what it does or doesn't add? Because I think most of the last 10 minutes of conversation has been both Daryl and Milo feeling that this is an adventure that has one set ending that completely dominates the direction of the whole thing, and which is sort of uniform and has one flavor. You can twist it in various ways, but it's more or less the same. So what other options are there, Olly?
Well, I mean, as I said, the what Milo said is an epilogue. That's quite right. It's kind of stuff that happens after the adventure is finished, but it's only based on how much doom the adventure is finished with, and it can range from what you guys had, where you actually affected good change in Greywater and changed it for the better, and the other side is it becomes an abandoned city, abandoned to chaos and nature and all sorts. But that's kind of it. I mean, you can't stop the Sylvaneth from trying to siege the city. You can't really stop the Skaven from invading. The Khorne cults, you can't stop them from doing Holfast Bridge.
And like, did it matter that we found them and rooted them out? Did it matter that we went to the barracks and killed the captain? And did it matter that we went to the smelter or whatever and killed Goldburn? And it's a bit like, for when those things happen, I expect some sort of story-based payoff, and there wasn't any.
There
or
were,
at least none was apparent.
Yeah, so there were things where if you'd have left them alive, but I mean, you couldn't really fail with what you were doing, right? So
I think that's probably quite significant. Is that many of the kind of forks in the road where our success or failure had narrative payoff, it came in a passive sense, in that we failed in doing the thing, or if we had made a different choice, more dramatic things might have happened. Whereas because we were successful or made the choice we did, what happened was that doom didn't get worse and we moved on to the next mission. So there wasn't like an interaction between characters that wouldn't have happened elsewise, or a noticeable change in one or other faction, which is another thing that you and I talked about in a recent conversation. Is this could have maybe been improved in the written adventure by having a clearer kind of like roundup of news of how the latest adventures have affected the different factions in the story. After each adventure, in the downtime, the characters could come across news or rumors or reports from like whatever their contacts, officials, the NPCs, that their most recent quest and the specific choice that they made or achievement that they made in its conclusion had such and such an effect on the Skaven, and that's why this might have happened elsewise or whatever. But in universe, rather than it being like, here's the fork you didn't take in the book, that material obviously just wasn't laid out for the GM in this adventure. Really, like you had to.
Yeah,
at the risk of like bring up a very meme at this point, but it did feel a lot like Mass Effect 3, where all the decisions that you have throughout the campaign, they only really change the epilogue. Like they change the color of what happens at the end.
Yeah.
You get this amount of doom, this happens after the story's finished. You get this amount, something else happens. It's like, okay, different outcomes, sure, but same experience.
The epilogue's just not a big enough payoff for all of that time spent. There needed to be some other like interstitial moments of payoff, or a big one at the end. Were genuine different scenarios the campaign could have ended in, because all of that time it was pretty anticlimactic in the end. When we got there were cool bits of approaching the final battle, but I would have loved to have just had even if like it has the game plan for a scenario, we say fuck it, we're out of here. You know what? You're on your own. This city should burn, or
you could have done
something else. but not that. You know what I mean? Because it was just like, again, the battle was the end point.
Well, I don't know how that would work.
Were there other branches that there could have been here? Were there other ways this could have ended, where we could have rounded off everything that we've done? All that we've done, honestly, there's no final battle. There's no siege. You've done your jobs. Stupendous. And throw another big threat in there, but you still have to do. I don't know what it is. I'm not a writer, but like, I would have loved to have a couple of genuinely different ways to end, not epilogues.
Well, I think
we could have tracked back to what we had done.
Yeah, and I think that's. So if I was to redo it, and this is all like problems with published adventures as well, because they can't just be like, here's ways your party could solve the problem 3 chapters in, and then I guess if they still want to play, here's something else they can do. Here's a tavern they can run for the next 3 chapters.
Yeah.
But I think like Alex said, if you guys heard rumors about these Khorne cultist activities happening, there's weird shit happening in the Grey Caps or Astrid Tavir being a bit weird, and if you chose to investigate that and you rooted them out and defeated them, that would feel a lot more fun than just being told to go there. Yeah, exactly. And also also if you ignored them and were like, actually we're going to go and negotiate with the Sylvaneth instead because that's what we're going to prioritize, but then you start hearing that people are going missing in blood ritual sacrifices and stuff, that makes it a lot more fun and interesting, and also it would make you guys think more about what you're doing every session.
It's fine having like
that.
Go ahead.
After you. My final thought on that was 2 adventures in a row. Let's go and work the Soulbound for a suspicious council. Come on, guys. Give me something slightly different next time. Like, both times it had relevance and it had interest. So I was a bit like, all right.
I wonder if the next one is going to be more explory, fighty, because it's in the realm of beasts, and that's quite like frontier lands.
Yeah.
Well,
it has felt like.
Have you met the Frontier Council?
This one is potentially
the initial like source of authority and theoretically ethical authority is just the local government. That has been the case for both of the published adventures we've done so far in Soulbound, and there are other options. One thought that came across my mind when you were just talking, Olly, about being able to make more drastic choices to do with picking sides in this kind of big conflict in this campaign that for us was just happening above us and we were following the path. It crossed my mind that it's sort of like the difference between the GM being given a playbook or like a chronological like route to follow in the book, and the GM being given like a toolbox of, or not a toolbox, that's a bit too broad, but like an anthology of, these are like 6 different story strings, and you can they all tie together nicely at different kind of beats and stuff, but you can to make sure that you can give your players the feeling of choice all the time. You have all of these so that if they make a big drastic choice in one of these strands, you can be like, oh shit, okay, I prepared for them to do that other one, but okay, we'll get to the next beat in that one. And if they're really good, maybe they'll kill that chieftain, and that whole strand will just be done, and they'll get a nice conclusion. But it can tie us nicely into one of the others, and that can be the thing that was running in the background all along. And if you're given those to work with, then it's the reality of substituting you doing all that work building, which is the whole world building, which is the whole point of having a published adventure, right? Like, whereas in this case, what we've been given is like a set story, and we've worked through from beginning to end, and lots of it was fun, but the whole became a little bit less satisfying for it.
Like what you just said is exactly the reason why I think Avernus to this day is still my favorite campaign that we've had. It is exactly because we were allowed to make our own choices and deal with. Yeah, I know the published adventure wasn't actually written that way, but as you said, there was enough material and there were enough tools for Olly to make that decision for us and give us an open world instead of giving us a singular path story. And it did really help because we, at least I felt like there was agency. Like I could decide to go here and deal with this, or maybe this makes more sense if we go and fight that guy first. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It was missing from this campaign. And looking at the story itself, there wasn't anything for Olly to do about it because was non-material. Like it was very, very focused on like the linear story that I wanted to tell, and that would have been fine. There's nothing wrong with a linear story, but don't dangle the story of two sides in front of me if you want it to be about one side. Like if you want it to be about one side, then focus on that side. Don't pretend that you care about both of them and like they have their
You
own.
would have
main
preferred
story.
just to be, the righteous destroyers in that situation, right? Just coming down and
if-
just, you know what? All right, let's just fight evil then.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a very fair point.
Yeah, make the Sylvaneth Ossiarch Bone Reapers.
Yeah, but either I think that's the thing. Either make them objectively, unequivocally the bad guys, or allow us to decide if we think they're the bad guys. If you're gonna tease it this whole time and make us think about ethics and maybe actually we shouldn't be poisoning the forest. Actually, should have poisoned it anyway. They're all dicks.
I think that might be going back to something that Daryl said early on, which was that he felt that our party was nicely balanced in terms of the characters' ethics and general, like, kind of not characters, personalities. It almost like added to some of the kind of background disappointment of not feeling the kind of ethical and political complexity that the story like is signaling to us that we should feel. Part of the disappointment of that was that we came into it with a party that was so diverse in the ways that we might respond to complex moral questions. And then it was just like, no, you can't stop the war, and you can't change sides, and you can't make peace, and you can't, be a spy for one side or convince any of these. Even though we're going to make it sort of seem like you can, that would have been less of a problem if we'd come in with like just a bunch of warmongering bastards. But because we did, okay.
A new sponsorship deal, my friend?
I don't think Mikey got permission to come in with branding. I didn't sign off on this.
What's happening here?
I've been on Discord all day doing work events, so I'm back trying to turn back into a real Discord boy and not a work Discord boy. Getting there.
Sorry, I finished waffling whatever I was waffling.
I think just to take us away from what I think is a point we've well made probably, is this campaign was darker than our Warhammer 40,000 campaign. It was grim, darker, and more relentlessly, savagely brutal at every single turn than when we went around in the grim, dark, far future of humanity. I thought that was maybe it was a bit much. I love a bit grim, dark, but I guess when we did our campaign, there were bits of payoff. There were genuine victories. Whereas I don't think this campaign allowed for, because it was on this terrible grinding path to war. There was stemming the tide was the best victory you could have, I think, at most of those points. Whereas I think it would have been nice for them to find some more moments of levity amongst all of this. There's some genuine brief respite where it says, all right, you have saved the day for another day, for a bit more, and people are happy. And so, and I don't know how that could have worked this campaign, but it is something I thought, all right, everything, the wheels have fallen off. We just put them back on. Okay. There was kind of that feeling kind of throughout.
What about the Great Hinge-Off? That was a moment of levity.
And I think you got us to thank for that.
Yeah, it's like out of universe levity, and in the middle of what was a relatively grisly, chaos themed.
Well, the slaughter in the tower, I think it will probably be.
It was the juxtaposition that made it more entertaining.
If I may add on to what Alex said, he's absolutely right. Again, The fact that we okay, Alex.
Happens
The
all the
fact that
time.
we that we had like different characters, different personalities. Like we had a lot to play with, and it still felt restricted, and it was just frustrating because we couldn't flesh like ourselves out the way that we would have if the campaign was more allowing of such a decision to be taken. So yeah, that it kind of like having a good thing on our side, like having an interesting group of characters, kind of made the campaign worse, which is really funny to say.
So you're saying that you were so good it made the campaign worse?
No, I'm saying
That's
that
it.
the campaign only focused on one facet, but every single character that we had was multifaceted, and we weren't allowed to like explore those different areas because the campaign was very
Yeah.
like.
So
this.
I think this is something interesting about Soulbound in general. And in the themes of the adventure in the book, it says that one of its big themes is mystery and noir and the kind of juxtaposition of sort of hope in, against all odds and against rising chaos. And I find it really weird that for a mystery noir kind of game, they make the players play essentially superheroes. Because
was that a general theme with Soulbound or this campaign?
it's for the whole of Soulbound.
Because our last one,
The whole of Soulbound.
Well, I think also the adventures, both adventures have said they are about grey characters and you don't know who to trust and investigating, blah, blah, blah.
Our previous one definitely had that. Like, that mystery kind of had me enthralled the whole way through the thread of our previous campaign. It was there were actual moments like, oh my gosh, that explains it, and it was quite through, and those grey characters carried it through. I think there were a lot of characters in this one that kind of popped in, and I'm not always the best at keeping track of people, but especially I could not keep track of your underhands from your glibbly flocks, and they didn't necessarily each make an impact. Whereas in the previous ones, there were people you hated, and there's people that you loved.
The people you hated.
Yeah, well, exactly. But everyone at least had vibes on them, and it did. Yeah, this one I think it didn't seem to flow in a straight line. There was a lot of stopping and starting and dotting around, which made for quite nice individual episodes, definitely. But it made it quite hard to go too attached to a through line that definitely didn't have that mystery element to it. And it wasn't even some of the bigger mysteries. It was like, well, yeah, they're just evil, aren't they? They've got corn stuff on their walls. Like, is this person bad? With like a splattered goat on the wall or like limbs in there. And it was it was a shame because that applies really well to the previous campaign. This one, I guess, for whatever reason, didn't quite stick.
That reminds me of, I wanted to ask you because I obviously haven't seen the book. I say that, I think I actually have got the book, but I haven't read it.
Good.
Is the character, are the characters, I think actually, I want to ask specifically about Onduran, is he written interestingly or well? Because I genuinely, for the whole second half of the campaign, right, after we got to the point of the shocking revelation that the government was not actually entirely morally right. I know. They had vested interests, questionable.
Well, that was the Forge, to be fair, the Brotherhood of the Brass.
Yeah, but they're all fucking in bed with each other, aren't they? Half of the members of the Brotherhood of the Forge were also in the council of the place, right?
I think no.
Two separate bodies, but
yeah.
the council of the Brotherhood of the Forge were they were the real power in the city.
Industrialists. Yeah,
they had the capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hence the politics. Anyway, after we'd uncovered the fact that those power holders were morally, questionable, and we shouldn't really want to be just taking quests off them willy-nilly and blah blah blah. The next thing wasn't, okay, we're going to forge our own path. It was, here's a good politician, and he's going to give you the quests that are good for the good things. And I was that would sort of have been fine if the predetermined story came up with some weird things about him that would at least give the character some dimensions. Not necessarily just like a stupid twist that's like, oh, he's actually a siege cultist. But just like something other than he's the good one now. You do what he says. And it never quite came. He was just a politician who wasn't bad.
Yeah, I think to answer your original question, was he written interestingly? And I think no, it's pretty much exactly what you said. The first time you meet him actually is when you get called into the council to talk about the kidnapped dryad. And there's Gulben and there's Astrid. Astrid's obviously very much like got her own agenda, and it's, you know, like it's anti-Sylvaneth. Gulben's kind of in the middle but leading her way. And Ondran's the one who pipes up and is a bit like, well, maybe we should just, you know, put our sensible hats on. You know, he's the adult in the room. He's the Keir Starmer in the room. You know. But yeah, I think it was always weird to be like telling you guys or giving you guys quests to do, like specific things to do because this one guy told you to. But I think the conclaves are supposed to be your people, like. They are the rightful rulers of the city, democratically as chosen by Sigmar. So they're kind of the ones who you were supposed to like support and want to be in charge. But again, like last time, why would you bother? Because you're all superheroes, and the superheroes don't listen to the politicians, as we all learnt in Captain America: Civil War.
I feel like we kind of acquiesced more than probably should have done. I don't feel like we ever kind of like, well, fuck you, let the bums off. We still were like conscious of what the wants and whims were. I don't think we quite Captain America'd it, as far as I could tell. I certainly didn't, but that might be just because I was me. But
too busy singing songs, having a good time.
Too busy singing songs and chanting sounds. I don't know where we're at in the conversation, so I don't want to derail it. But I was just going to go in my notes, and I didn't want this to be super negative, so I was looking through it. And I was looking at some really cool moments. If I could be allowed to kind of mention 4 like really good.
Yeah, we were trying to think of things we liked about it earlier, but we ran out really quickly.
Well, I might repeat myself then, but look at my notes. I remember I actually really loved the start of the campaign. It was quite dramatic, and getting to Greywater Fast was quite a fascinating setting. The way it was described, and I loved. There's a lot of build up to get on our black cog. We got there, and that had been then taken down and destroyed, and we had to like scramble to get there. It felt like a pretty much classic like shipwrecked, and you just claw your way to get to your destination. It felt very desperate to get there, and it was obviously pretty fucked up when we got there. So that I really loved that. Although then I think the problem was that I remember getting there and thinking there was unlimited possibilities. Almost felt like it could have been like an Avernus kind of open world, but then we got very funneled again down very specific paths, and it didn't quite flow around that. But I remember that was really really exciting. I remember the moments when we found out about the kind of experimentations going on with the Skaven. I remember that felt like, oh, this is the whole campaign. I was really excited by that, which did kind of tail off a little bit because I kind of thought that could have. I wonder if that had been like a really bigger thread. But it was kind of like that same problem of, oh, someone experiment. He's kind of good about it and bad about it, and it was kind of almost too grave to the point you really couldn't land aside. But I remember really being fascinated by that. And then definitely obviously the kind of the big moment of the campaign was the split, the fight, the kind of betrayal at the kind of sabotage at the big event. And I loved that lead into it. We had to recruit all the councillors and then head into that, and then that sabotage. It really was it was getting Games of Thrones, a bit red wedding-y, like, and it was dramatic. I really felt very kind of intense. And it led to some really exciting stuff as well with characters like Chardew, like did ripple through the whole campaign. So it was that kind of middle point did really, I think without that would have been a real challenge, the whole thing. That really set a lot in stone, which I really liked. Like I wrote down the notes kind of like for the start of this, the last thing I wrote were Chardew rages in despair and attacks. And it's Black Cog down. We're on the verge of war. That's what I've written here. Like, that's very dramatic. That was a really good middle part of the campaign, and it really hit really well, which I really enjoyed. So those were excellent bits. I think the only thing I'd say was they didn't ever quite fully get where I thought they were going to go, but as moments along the way, it really propelled things forward and were very memorable.
Nice. I think because I thought I knew where everyone stood on that Holfast Bridge thing. I know that Alex and Milo definitely didn't enjoy it at all. Not satisfying. Nothing positive came out of it at all in terms of narrative or satisfaction.
Was that just we couldn't do much to affect the outcome of it? Was that the yeah? Which I get, but
and it was particularly because the Avenger had us ferrying away around town for an entire session, convincing politicians to arrive, only to be like, "Psych, stop wasting your time."
But again, that's very Red Wedding. Like you think it's all going away, you've done all the work, you've had all the plans, emotions, and then just some fuckery just scuppers it all. I kind of thought it made it feel more dramatic. I totally get it, and then it's problematic.
It was dramatic, like no doubt. It was shocking, and there was an upside to that. Like it was dramatic. If I could have like stopped seeing nothing but rage and hatred throughout it, I might have enjoyed the drama.
Yeah.
That was my least favorite part of the whole campaign, and it was for me when the penny dropped completely that we were simply on tracks. That's really why. Because actually, I think I really enjoyed the first part of the campaign more.
Is it? So, do you think if there was a future campaign and there was a mission that you were doing or some sort of job you were doing, which out of your hands gets made for naught, rendered like useless or rendered for naught, is that the more annoying bit, or is it the fact that the sabotage itself happens like off screen? Because I feel like for me, the latter bit is the worst bit, because you literally wake up and it's like, oh, I smell smoke. Oh, it's like some silver death being burnt, to crisps.
Yeah, not even a pretense that we might have been able to try and stop it.
Yep.
I mean, and look, I think we all understand. I think we probably do here all understand that there is a time for events out of your control. And Olly, we talked about that GM video about is railroading bad, and it's more nuanced than yes. Oh, yeah. But I think this was it in its worst and most final form.
Yeah,
with none of the positives.
Some surprise.
Yeah, is that it was such a good setup? Is that again kind of like that we had that great bit, and then that kind of led into the whole throw when we were trying to then figure out what happened and unearth the story of the grey coats and the all stuff. We're trying to lure them out with all the treasure and stuff. And that felt really good. And then we just didn't. I guess I wasn't frustrated by the moment. I thought it was really good, but I am frustrated thinking about it. And then there wasn't some payoff that you go, oh, and that's how you kind of redeem that. Like you have that really cathartic thing of this thing happened, and I was so annoyed that it happened, we couldn't stop it. And then actually realize it in the campaign. Oh, they did that because then you did do this stuff later that got the guy who did it or did figure it out. Like that it definitely lacked as well. It didn't lack that. It lacked that payoff to it. Although I still tested it was a good moment.
I'm okay with like things happening that are not in your control. Like it just happens sometimes, and it's kind of like it leads to a good story. However, what really annoyed me is the fact that nothing that we did, like rounding up people and everything, it didn't feel like it made any difference at all. Like we thought about it, we had discussions about it, we planned it out. At least like some sort of payoff. There needs to be something. Like, yeah, sure, everything needs to go to shit. Everything is going bad. Things that you didn't expect, things not going your way. That's completely fine. But don't render everything that we've done, completely useless. Like you mentioned the Red Wedding, for example. For me, instead of like this being a Red Wedding moment, like imagine the Red Wedding, but then even though they weren't in the hall themselves, all of the Starks were killed, for example. Like regardless of whether they made the decision to go there or not. Yeah, okay, so if they were there, they would have been killed. If they weren't there, they would have been killed. So what's the point in going there or not? Like that's what it felt like. It didn't feel like the decisions that we took led to it, or maybe like something else that we decided to do or like plan to help us out affected it in any way. Like it felt like nothing that happened around that part meant anything. And yeah, like Milo said, like at that point it did feel like, yes, we are just on a railroad and just go along with the story, I guess, because that's it.
And I think also when you have moments like that in RPG, in games, in films, stuff, like everything's going fine, something goes wrong. Like, I couldn't have seen that coming. Darn it, that's an important storytelling tool. But usually in said situation, when I don't know, the building starts collapsing, and that's really going to mess with the plans. The the heroes have an option to do something.
Yeah.
Like, right, well, let's get the building stabilization portal going or something. I don't know. Let's hop in that plane and chase after them because they had a getaway vehicle we didn't think of. But actually, this one was like, well, shit, back to town, I guess.
Yeah, I guess
Something
I guess the then moving on to like, oh, now we know who's responsible, and it's Astrid Tavir and it's Gulben Coldrock, and that's
But we
kind
didn't know, did they? We knew very vaguely and broadly that it was possibly cultists. We didn't know that.
We didn't know much by that point.
We were still working for Gulben at that time. Like, we were still doing things. We were a bit suspicious.
That could have been my fault though, because I added that Black Cock down in. Otherwise, you would have gone straight into chapter 4, where Onderan's like, "I'm almost certain Astrid is the reason is the sort of the orchestrator of what happened, because she's very clearly planned this and she's preparing for war now, and it's what she's been all along." So maybe that was on my side not showing that enough, but also, yeah, I don't know if that makes it as satisfying.
I don't
know.
For me, I think it's just that, like, you know, can we chase them down and kill them and capture them and get something out of this? Can we, you know, like the immediate, like, information is not a big payoff for such a big dramatic moment. I think that would have maybe helped it land for me, even just something.
Yeah.
Like a separate section.
I'm just thinking about what I think about storytelling in general.
No, but a separate section that the campaign itself had that actually like does it a little bit better, not by much. And it's the end part where you have like these different threats. It did feel kind of linear because you have like these 3 different threats to deal with them. Like you had a chance of 2 and everything. So there was some choice being made there, but ultimately it just resulted in, again, the epilogue being different. In our case, we failed one of them. So like the demonic dog or whatever it was basically ran off, and it was still a threat. But if that had happened earlier, and then we see the repercussions of what's happening, like, yeah, okay, the siege had to happen. Like, that was the thing that we couldn't change. But there were still other things happening that we could affect, and we did. The cannon, again, the dogs, there was a portal at some point. So it almost managed there. But since it was so close to the end, it didn't really matter because it was the end.
Yeah, I would have extrapolated the threats thing and made it so that you could stop them from progressing. Like, yeah, as you said, like put all those corn threats, make them happen like over the course of the adventure, and then you guys can investigate them. Oh, you see some grey caps, you know, shuffling, kidnapping some, you know, Grant Shaps, Sigmar Grant Shaps.
So much happening.
What's going on?
Meetings being held somewhere, invasions in another place. A cannon was overtaken.
Better about it.
It was sad.
Do you feel like you've got a good long list of things to avoid for next time, Ollie?
Yes, and they're called published adventures. They do serve a purpose, but I think I don't know. I always get this feeling that I don't know if you're going to think it's an insult or not, but I don't think the writers ever have you guys in mind for adventures.
A lot of the time. Sure of that.
Well, I mean that specifically came up a lot, didn't it? Throughout the whole. I don't know how many times we had a conversation that was a bit like, you're kind of like, well, obviously they were going to do that.
Yeah.
Like, well, obviously, yeah. Think about how players actually play, man.
But there was somebody in the Sigmar Discord, Soulbound Discord, who said that their players, they were like, oh yeah, my players are going to just totally jump ship from the city and join the Sylvaneth and like help them siege the city. I was like, fair enough, but the book is not going to help you with that at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
do it yourself.
I don't know if we would necessarily have done that ever, but it's an example of the sort of thing that, had it been possible, half the conversation we've just had wouldn't be happening. Like, if that had ever felt like it was an option, like, Daryl would be in a very different place right now. it never did. Like it was abundantly obvious that there was not a single page in that book that would tell you help you to shape that story at all. So we never considered it an option.
I have a question that I think is sort of for Olly and sort of for the other players. Do you think once you have decided that you're on rails, that you just stop thinking and accept that you're on rails? Because I think maybe we did, and you just even just the knowledge that you are on a published adventure, maybe you've just done one, so you kind of know how it goes. You more likely to settle into a rhythm of go get quest, go do quest, and you might think outside the box a little bit on the quest. But it didn't cross my mind once to try and rock the boat of the campaign, because in my head I'm going, well, what's the DM going to do with that? He's either going to have to rewrite the entire adventure himself, or he's going to have to find a way to politely say no. If we'd have said, actually, I think the only way to solve this is that we have to go on an adventure to another realm, and we have to get the Lumineth to come and mediate this situation, and something. I don't know, something that you might do if you were on a crazy open adventure where you find your own solutions and do things. It doesn't even cross your mind, does it?
It ties those 2 points together for me. Someone who generally I didn't ever sit and go, we're on rails, and also someone in these campaigns who enjoys chaos and pushing the boundaries and likes to, I've been railed in a bit, but when it's always to pull something in this way or see where the boundaries can break, split the party here, do that. I think it does speak volumes that even for me it didn't spring to my mind. Whereas in most campaigns I usually am like, what if I just run over there and jump over that thing? Will that do that? And it didn't really. It didn't. I never ever stopped to think, we're on rails, here we go. But I think it does show that by the fact that, like you said, I think it would have been possible to be with the Sylvaneth, and if in my mind I would have thought that's really great, let's go do that. But the fact it didn't even spring to my mind, someone who again is looking for ways to break the game and make
actual agent of chaos.
Yeah, it does show that there was whatever it was just wasn't there. That was, and with the specific point Alex made about the Sylvaneth, I think it's because the first third we were, well, even more than that, we were our quest givers were the humans. We were going to Forever Fondness. We never had a moment where we even kind of stopped. Maybe on the way, if we'd met one of them and had a really in-depth conversation and fought alongside them, and then got there, then found their baddie, we'd have had some connection.
Like Chardew.
Yeah, but it was also a little late by the time they were involved and getting around stuff. It didn't, we were already following the threads of the people inside. So that's kind of the railroad, right? We'd been kind of put on the tracks by the politicians. They were our quest givers. There were so many of them. By the time the Sylvaneth were concerned, we weren't really invested in them. To the point we never think about jumping ship because there was no structure in place to even facilitate that. So it's interesting.
I think Chardew, because you meet him like towards the end of chapter 1 even, and he sits down with you and you like spend the night with him. You sit by the campfire and stuff. I think he would have been a great candidate for like a Sylvaneth NPC quest giver who you could be like, you know what, I'm actually gonna sneak out of the city. I'm gonna go talk to Chardew and I'm gonna see what he thinks I should do.
Yeah,
for sure.
And he maybe give us some alternative ways to approach the problems.
Yep.
That's I never thought.
Which I feel like he
so much.
He probably should have been able to, like, the way this character was written. It's kind of unbelievable for the writers to believe that we will believe that someone like Chardew won't have other plans, other ways of dealing with this. He felt like a very interesting character that was pushed into a square to fit the campaign. Like, he had to have his motives. He had, he had his he was a wise character, but he was forced to be a certain way. Again, with the whole excuse of the war song and everything, it felt very artificial.
I hated the way
1,000 years pacifism. He sees one of his mates killed, and he's like, you know what, actually, but no.
And he felt a bit isolated as well. Again, if that time with him is spent, but more like again in like the Sylvaneth camp, and we'd seen like their way, bit cliche, but seen their way of life, and the little kiddie Sylvaneth running around, like just just a little bit of like investment into that. It was just him, and then like you say, you don't intrinsically try and play for the rewards and the quest givers, but you're just kind of trained to follow that by video games and the games. So even if we'd been there and he'd given us a little thing to do, it would have been planted in our brain, oh, he can be there. And we probably would have thought about going back to him, but he's kind of popped up all the worst moments. It was kind of like, oh god, poor Charlie, who's in trouble.
Yeah. We had more interaction with Sylvaneth in the previous campaign, and this was centered around Sylvaneth, like the whole thing between the Sylvaneth and the city. And it's such a missed opportunity. That's why it's frustrating. Not because it's bad, it's because it's good but mishandled. That is exactly why it pisses me off.
Yeah, what if Chardew asks you to keep a lookout for like kidnapped dryads and other Sylvaneth in the city?
Yes.
Anything.
And you could
literally anything.
They weren't those really basic, just little plot things that just tie things together. That maybe are a bit like, oh, Charlie, you did say that might happen. It's a bit rote, but it does really help tie things in. It's got to be done in little forms. Doesn't it really? It's like I was saying earlier, it didn't really put the pieces together in a thread that you could kind of feel like you're progressing up and down a kind of storyline. It was a setting and lots of little things that happened that were kind of all connected. But there were really cool moments within that, which was great. I think you can do both, and like Daryl was saying, missed opportunity. I think you could have easily done both and threaded it all really nicely.
Like even near the end, when he like switched, when he had like his whole like rage thing, and he was destroying things, and we just went there, gave him a stern talking to, and he was like, "Oh, you know what? Maybe you're right," and he turned it around again. I was like, "What?"
Yeah, well, actually, that was a bit of me intervening because, his because he is essentially like he has his like despair-o-meter that goes up in that third chapter, and I think you guys got like just one pip too high, and then he's at Holfast Bridge. He's supposed to just snap in a way, and again the Wolsong thing not very well explained, but apparently he was beyond that point. He was non-redeemable. And he was supposed to turn up in the siege and sabotaging the water supply thing, and he's just like, he's just gone. You have to fight him, probably kill him. And I thought that would just suck. But also, no one seemed that interested in being his friend anymore anyway. So I kept giving you guys opportunities. And then bloody Dreadbug was not at the session, so no one wanted to talk to him. And so it did seem a bit yo-yo-y, but that was probably my fault.
It's a funny one as well. It's unavoidable, but like because almost pretty much half the party was Sylvaneth as well. In a weird kind of way, it made the Sylvaneth we met. Well, for me especially, it was like, well, the Sylvaneth are here. Let the Sylvaneth deal with them, because they were always in the first ones there. So it definitely didn't help me kind of get in with them more. It didn't kind of help that element of it, because that's just the way it is, right? Which is, I don't know how you can avoid that problem, and that's kind of impossible. It would be fascinating if we'd been like a whole party of stuff. That would have been really.
Yeah, actually, on that point, because that's a very good point. Olly, did the campaign specifically say that you shouldn't allow Sylvaneth, or you should have a full party of Sylvaneth? Because the way that everything happened, having two Sylvaneth in the party felt very weird, especially like being one of them, because you felt like you were on the wrong side.
Yeah, there is a text box about Sylvaneth PCs, and it just says, like you will be seen as one of the enemy and you will be treated with suspicion at all times. And I think it even gives you a penalty to social checks as well within the city with certain NPCs. I don't know if I even did that, but yeah, it does.
Yeah,
it does.
Those things again. I know we don't like it, but it would have been a really good candidate at some point, maybe just one session, to split the party and have like that moment where it gets a bit like in Lost when they get separated for just for and then you kind of come away with these different experiences, or flip it round and maybe have the humans and dwarves get stuck in with the Sylvaneth get stranded with the humans a little bit.
Oh,
and get a weird perspective, and
who goes back in time?
Yeah, a little bit. Not necessarily, but just I think that that's another missed opportunity as well. Like is like I say, that to really mix up, because again, it would have been, if there's some drama, I know the guys struggle with it, because like you say, Daryl and Alex's characters, you could tell they never wanted to, but also the story was railroading them so much, they never felt they could go, well, I am going to side with the Sylvaneth. Another great example of why we didn't do what Alex said. It's crazy that would never came to our mind when literally half the party was. We still were just so being dragged in by the political story and the quest givers. We didn't stop to even go, we had like, this sucks that we're fighting them, but I guess they're and I guess we can help them this way. but we never actually stopped and even thought, well, let's just literally help them because all our givers were in the city being attacked. Our mission was to help the city, or we had to go to the city, all our stuff was in the city. Yeah, it did a bit too much to lock you in and then try and make you think differently. But like you said, there was no framework to support that.
Yeah, I think one of the worst feelings of GMing is when your players are doing something and they don't know why they're doing it. They don't really care why they're doing it. They don't know. When it's like, oh, why are we doing this again? I think, Mikey, you're always trying to keep an eye on the bigger picture, right? Like the bigger mission. And it's such a...
I struggle with this one a lot of times. I remember notes. I'm trying to look back again. It didn't. I wasn't able to pick up that through line as well. Like that's where the mystery didn't land much. There were little mysteries that get stopped and started. So I guess again, by the second half of the campaign, the want to follow them did drop off. I was probably just going to fluff again. So I did. I lost that focus. It was like, okay, it's just about Sylvaneth wanting to do it, but there was loads of small moments where they would rise up and get beaten, and we do that and get that. Because I love that. I love that overarching thing. It helps me a lot. Because I think as well, just on a personal note with my character, I think the main issue with the character I made was that I kind of locked a lot of his characteristics at the start about very basic Fire Slayer stuff, about Urgold and stuff, and then we just on a practical level, we couldn't really make that work. So I was like, oh well, this doesn't really have a character actually, because this whole thing was about being this diehard gold hunter and treasure hunter, and then it was too complicated, the mechanics and the places out for it, so that kind of took away a lot of the actual even character I had, which was so that was just tough on a personal level. And then without the bigger storyline to link into as well, and then the Sylvaneth, it made it trickier to invest for sure. Even though I actually had a lot more fun with the mechanics, as you all noticed. That was kind of why I was so heavy on the fact my abilities and stuff, because they were really interesting to me. So I never played like an area effect fighter. So that's why that stuff did interest me, because that was kind of the only thing I could really lock onto, because the others just hadn't quite come together. For
Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
But going back to what you said, Milo, to answer your question, well, actually, on your point, I guess, if one of you guys messaged me in the week and was like, "Look, I really think Vargi would just do this, or I really just want them to go and do this," and I would actually be probably more than happy to alter things to fit the party. It's just when you're running the adventure, it's almost harder to think how to change it compared to starting from scratch, because you don't have that time where you sit down and are creative, because you're just, I read the adventure, I make notes.
Yeah. No, I think on the players. And you, to be fair, you said that several times throughout the campaign. But I think and sorry, Alex, it's hard as well when you're in it to be like, what I think when you're in the box, it's just you stop thinking outside the box, and so every time you're like, I just want to do something different, and my brain's like, well, let's follow the missions. That's what I want to do. I don't know.
That's more or less exactly what I was going to say, Milo, is on the players' side of that equation of, well, if you just come to me and said, Vargi would do this, we could have done it. Like, we were conditioned not to. Even if you GM are saying, please give me cool ideas that you want to do, it won't naturally happen in the way that it would if we didn't subconsciously know that there were chapters of a book that you were waiting to get to. You know?
Absolutely.
I definitely have. I always, not always, but every campaign, I'm sure I've at least some point pinged you and been like, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? And not all the time, but at least one or two moments. And that's the same thing again. It didn't even spring to mind to even think about that, because we discussed ad nauseum. We're all kind of a bit boxed in by the framework of it all. Because
So published adventures are the death of creativity. Is to round off.
No, I have to disagree with that, because a good published adventure will, create opportunities for you to expand and create opportunities for you to think of like things that you want to do and like how you can integrate them. It didn't happen in this case. Like, again, Avernus is a published adventure, but I genuinely feel like our decisions made that campaign. Like we actually decided.
No, that was a modified adventure, though, right?
Oh, it was, but it was modified.
You have specifically like here's how to make Avernus an open world adventure.
Yes, I literally bought a third party guide which changed the adventure.
Yeah, for sure. But again, there was enough material for that to be allowed. That's what I'm saying. So Olly was able to do that because of the way that everything was structured inside that campaign. I genuinely do not think that he would have been able to do it with this campaign in particular, because it didn't feel like there was any opportunity for experimentation.
No, he definitely
you
could.
undersell our GM here. If only he had the time and emotional capacity to do it, he definitely
Exactly.
would.
It's just,
You know,
again,
But
I think
if you're going to take a book and then you want to rewrite the book, why just write a book? It's probably gonna be more fun, and you'll probably be more able to do it.
You were going to say, Mikey?
I was going to say, it's kind of repeating ourselves, and it's that thing of it just didn't. I always assume Olly. I've always enjoyed being like, let's do this, and then gleefully watch Olly squirm for a week to try and figure out what we're going to end up with next week. It's one of the funnest things about it. It wasn't about not thinking he could do it. It just didn't ever, like we said, it's a lot now. It just didn't even split into our mind that would be an option. And I was just thinking. Just then, but my brain's gone blank. You know when you know you've forgotten something and you're going to try and remember it, and you can just feel it get further away. That just totally happened. I'll remember it, so someone else jump in.
Well, I mean, I know we were going to touch a little bit on kind of final thoughts on Soulbound as an adventure, so maybe we can just do that quickly. I think I was enjoying it more when I finished the last adventure than when I finished this one. Mechanics wise, I guess I still really like the setting, but I think it's so easy to just break the combat, which is kind of, and it for the combat for me was really, really not interesting.
It's one of the things that is really upsetting with Soulbound, because when we first got into it, it felt like a breath of fresh air, because you could do so many things, like coming from D&D and that sort of stuff, where things are a lot different and like a lot more restricted in like the combat and abilities and everything. Whereas in Soulbound, it felt more open. But that's until you stick with it for a certain number of months, and then you realize that it's wide, but it's quite shallow. It looks good at first, but personally, I got bored of the structure and the mechanics quite quickly, I have to admit.
Yeah, I still think zones are more of a pain in the ass than grid is on battle maps.
Yeah, so I always like them. I'm very visual, so I love seeing that map, and it kind of forces the maps to be more drawn out because they have to, because the zone. So I that's just a personal thing. I'm a very visual thinker, so I quite like seeing the segments you can move into. It feels very nice. But that's just me. So I do actually like zones.
Well, I like them, but at the same time, I kind of like the story immersion in a way as well, because like if I'm at the edge of a zone and I have an enemy in the zone near me and an enemy in the next zone near me, I can hit one but not the other, but they're the same distance apart visually, or like theater of the mind or whatever. But since they're in a different zone, then you can't.
But I quite like that, because to me the zones, because they are wide, I always think like there's a lot of movement going on there, so it's never that simple. No one is static. Because you are
a better representation of that, isn't it?
You're charging around, you're dashing, you are ducking. Your action isn't you attacking. Maybe you're dodging a fireball and arrows. You're moving and lunging over there. Then you attack. Then it matters where they are.
Yeah.
But I agree.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
My 2 cents on zones is I don't buy it. I don't like. I don't inherit, like, from my experience, it doesn't feel like it does that.
A linear racetrack.
I'm next to a road. Yeah.
Of like making, like, enhancing the physicality, or like helping my imagination make the movements more dynamic or anything like that. Like, for me, I don't feel like having a grid, as you do traditionally in D&D or in board games or tactical games of all kinds, inherently like takes me out of the experience. I think it just fades into the background and also helps with making combat actually a little bit more interesting most of the time, mechanically. I got really bored of combat in this, and like not just because.
God, sorry.
Well, not just because my character for once got a particular damaging thing, which never happens in the past. So that was exciting. But also just because we all just settled into a thing, like not even just a battlefield role, but one action that we would do repeatedly.
Yeah.
And like that's from a party of people who've played quite a fair bit of role-playing games, who've made an effort to build distinct characters with different ideas for how they're going to play. And we still ended up having just one action that we would all do throughout a fight, more or less.
But that didn't happen in the last Soulbound.
Yeah, here's my hot take on combat. Combat was boring because of us. Combat in Soulbound is not to blame for the choices that we made to make ourselves have one powerful ability each. Soulbound is packed to the rafters with opportunity to design your character of any class to play the way you want to play it. Infinitely better than D&D, where you have to get to a certain level where you unlock a skill, and then you use that one and then that one, or you get to another level and you get 2 actions, so you hit them twice. Like, it's absolutely jam-packed with it. And I was bored of my character because I thought I'd be able to create more options for combat, and it turns out it didn't. But if anyone was bored at like having their one big trigger they kept pulling, they have only themselves to blame.
Why did we all do it?
And I don't mean that in a narky way, because obviously we all did, because we all want to be good at combat. Yeah. You all want to get better and better and better at combat. But what would be better is if we all got more and more different and varied in combat, and we used that instead.
But it didn't happen. It didn't happen in the last campaign. So why this time did we all get shoot in?
Because Olly and I talked about this a bit at the weekend. I really, really enjoyed combat in the last campaign because I was a spellcaster and I had lots of different options. And Soulbound gave me the tools to create exactly the spells I wanted to create, which meant I was the exact thing I wanted to be, and I had different levers to pull, and I was constantly doing that. And that didn't happen in this campaign.
Yeah, so you're saying that, and you just said that you played a spellcaster in the other game and not won this game. I didn't play a spellcaster in either of them, and combat for me always boiled down to the same thing. In the previous campaign, it was defend an area, and if someone gets into that area, you hit them hard. And in this campaign, it's you rush into an area to hit people hard. Yeah. But that's literally it. But in both cases, and they were built quite differently, but it still basically boils down to the same thing. And
do you know what they both were though? They were both min-maxed. They were completely min-maxed to be really good at one thing. And you can do that in any system. I bet combat can be really boring in D&D if you absolutely pure optimize to be really, really good at it.
They were optimized.
Yeah, you were 10 out of 10 for defending, and you were 10 out of 10 for attacking. But in either of those campaigns, you could have said, I'm going to do a bit of both. I'm going to be good at defending areas, but I'm also going to have a charge ability, and sometimes I'm going to use that. And sometimes I'm going to use this different thing. Sometimes I'm going to use a sort of non-combat move that will, like the whatever that tactician ability I had. That was fun. That was something different to do.
Go ahead, sorry.
All I'm saying is you chose to give yourself one trigger to pull because the synergies are there and they're really interesting and they're powerful and they're a big draw.
I agree. And you're completely right. And I did design them that way, both of them actually. But it's because, and that's what I meant previously with like the whole wide and shallow thing. It's because it felt like that would be the thing that makes sense. Like, again, going back to the previous character, for example, he was a very good defender. So why would I get abilities that wouldn't work with him defending? Why would I'm allowed? Like, yeah, okay, you're giving me all these options, but I can pick and choose from everything. But doesn't mean I'm gonna have a good character. I'll do like 1 damage a turn. Like, yeah, sure, I can do it different ways, but
I would argue that based on what you've just said, you would have had a better character.
It could have been. It could 100% have been the case.
Yeah. I want to make one final reference before I let Olly speak. And it reminds me of a really great tweet about Doom. Some of you will have seen this one. When they brought out a new Doom, whichever one it was, there was like some freeze gun in it or something. And someone tweeted, "Oh, will there be a way to turn this off?" And they responded saying, "You control the buttons you press." And I think that could apply to how you choose to build your character. It's a big draw to build the most efficient character. Yeah. But maybe playing the most efficient isn't actually playing the most fun.
Yeah. So
that's fair.
So as someone who has only played one character in a campaign, like one player character, I'm actually much less experienced than you guys at it. But when I built Yarlin, in the combats, I always because I made him so weak and fragile, I really enjoyed the aspect of him or them basically being quite cowardly and sticking at the back and trying to stay alive. And all of the skills were about trying to stay out of combat. I didn't make them tougher. I didn't make them strong. I didn't give them, until the end when I got like obviously like the warlock armor, which is badass in tier 4. But and we were fighting like fucking Space Marines. But that kind of fantasy of being very, I don't know, like fragile and wanting to being sort of combat resistant, and then their psychic powers wanting to avoid damage rather than dealing damage. So kind of treating the combat like I'm still role playing, but I know that after like 5 characters, it's probably you run out of ideas of how to do that in a cool way.
Well, I think that's what comes down to the start. Like obviously, like Molasses was the perfect example. That was like her ability set was exactly her character. It was sneaky and violent and brutal and silly, and it was great because there was just so much stuff I could do. And I don't know why there was so much more options there, but I think I took a lot of smaller abilities that combine well. So the shadow stepping into backstabbing with the passives like savage thing that would give bonuses. It's always a really nice thing. It's probably worth thinking.
You had options.
Yeah, but it just felt like Olly's saying with Yana, it feels good when your character that you're playing is feel like the things they're doing in combat are what they would do out of combat, and so it's almost nice to think about like what combat abilities would I use if I was role playing. So backstabbing and all the shadow stuff, I use that all the time in the actual roleplay sections to like. So it's hard to know what the campaign's going to be, but it's not a bad way to look at it. With Szechuan, it was interesting because like the main problem with him is that I picked a lot of dud abilities like Sense Urgold, Forbidden Knowledge. They just didn't. They were used to that kind of wasted 2 kind of big slots of extra stuff, and so it definitely pushed stuff. But I didn't find combat boring mainly because my abilities were so weird and broken. They always led to ridiculous conversations. So even though I was pretty like the volcano up. I think there were enough like variables to that I enjoyed it, and I never played like a zone character before, so I didn't find my combat boring. It didn't thematically fit because I was this big tough dwarf who was also quite weak, so I hid, but it didn't make sense because it was that didn't quite synergize as well. But really hard to know off the brunt of it. But definitely, I didn't find my combat boring, but that's because I'd never played a spellcaster or a zone defender before. And the one thing I never did that I realized about 3 sessions before, I could have had a volcano and a tornado in play at once. I never realized it because you can cast volcano with 2 metal. Then next turn you can sustain it for free with 1 metal and cast tornado with 1 metal as well. So I could have actually had both in play. I didn't realize until like 3 sessions before the end. I was like, wait, where I was broken. I was like doing it all. I realized I couldn't actually a delayed turn. I could have volcano pushed in there, which would have been fun. So my abilities caused a lot of dramas, but they were a lot of fun for me for both the nonsense of it and because it was quite different for me. So I think it was my prerogative with this character was to create someone with different abilities that, while not super varied in combat, it was the same shit as the start. It always felt fresh to me, which was nice.
Well,
so one for your next blog, Olly, is min-maxing fun?
I think it's fun for one person.
I think it's fun when you get to like the last 4 sessions, you nailed it. That's kind of ideal.
I think the question to ask really is not is it fun or not. That's entirely personal preference. But strength does not equal fun. It's certainly a part of it.
Definitely,
part of it. And as I said, like being bad in combat is not fun. So there's, for me at least, I will look for more of a balance next time where it's for me. I realize it really is more about having options rather than being specifically good or bad at something. But Daryl, you might want to consider looking at something that has more breadth and less focus if you found that those 2 characters that were really, really, really good at one thing became unfun to do those really good things in the end.
I think the cool thing about Zuriel though was because you made your spells to fit the character. You didn't have to think about, how can I make this magic missile mine? You were like, my lightning fists punch people to stun them into staggered.
Yeah, and it felt cool, and it was effective, and it fit the character.
Yeah,
it was like that's a bit of a holy trinity there.
Yeah.
So can I just play Zuriel again? Like,
It's not like we haven't had campaigns where like combat, at least for me, wasn't boring. For example, again, like we only had like 1 or 2 sessions, but Pathfinder exam, for example, I genuinely felt like I had a lot of options to choose from. Yeah, maybe it's because I played a spellcaster. Maybe spellcasters feel more varied. That's kind of what I'm being led to believe at this point.
Yeah, you did go quite wide with the
But
spells, didn't you?
We're only in
yeah,
one combat.
exactly. No, we had like
Had a
at least
couple, had a
2 or
few.
3. But anyway, like not the point. Even while building the character, like I never felt like I should focus on one thing. I felt like actually I was allowed and I should diversify. Whereas in this case, with the way that like things build upon each other, again, it looks great because you have a massive selection, but you know that this is like, for example, like playing, I don't know, Diablo. Like Diablo's a hot topic right now. Like yeah, sure, like you can try out a lot of different things, but there are builds, and there are builds for a reason because those work, right? And if you stray from the build, like especially in like games like Path of Exile, for example, like yeah, you can stray from a build, but then good luck enjoying it because you're going to suffer for it. So
I don't think Diablo. I think if you played Diablo and you were like, I'm not gonna, you know,
I haven't played Diablo 4, but I have played.
I imagine you can go in, you can pick whatever talents and skills you want, and you can still have fun with the game. And somebody on Reddit being like, it's actually not optimized. You can't do the difficulty 10 whilst with this build.
Right, so that may have been a bad example. So, but yeah, Path of Exile, for example, that's more of what I wanted to talk about because that's a game that I played not a lot, but I have a bit of an idea. And yeah, if you try to go your own way in that game, good luck. Just good luck.
Yeah,
and it kind of felt the same way in this game, not like the campaign, but the game in general. Like yeah, you have a lot of options, but not really. Like the options are there, and you can use them, but doesn't mean that you should. But again, maybe this is because I was a spellcaster. Maybe spellcasters do feel more varied because you have more options.
Yeah.
Given the situation.
I think.
So maybe that's.
Yeah, I think there are definitely varied depths to different character types. Like D&D, people always list, complexity of classes. And bards and magic wizards are down at the most complex, and you've got like berserkers and fighters at the top being the least complex. So yeah, like if you are bored with not having enough mechanics, then perhaps find ways to engage with more in-game mechanics.
And that's what Milo was saying about being the fragility of the badness like that again with Molasses at work, because there were loads of great times where I knew if I like used to fling herself into combat and it went badly a few times, but those are the funnest moments where like I go in a perfect setup thing and like, miss the backtails and suddenly I'm just surrounded by 3 giant dudes. It's like, uh-oh.
Or when you like saved somebody, like you shadow stepped in to save somebody.
Yeah, that was really fun. But fucking up or like changing it around, like you say. So it's really hard to see. I don't know why. I don't know how I got lucked out on that. But engaging with the mechanic, like I say, it's like it was because she was stabby but movementy. So maybe it's making sure your ability set has 2 threads to it at least. So you're either I don't know strong but fast. Or maybe it's thinking that way to kind of like make sure you're just not doing one thing. I guess.
Well, every time you took a turn, it was a risk, right? You didn't know if you were going to fail the spell and get stuck there, or like.
It was great. And actually, that's one of the bigger problems with Szechuan. His abilities are really weird. Like they have these DN tests that once you put a couple points in statement, I would never fail them. And also they like a DN5 test to do his thing, and I never failed it, but it never got any better if I did really well at it. So it was just almost a guarantee, which is a weird thing as well. So there was no risk in it, and it was almost pointless I'd even roll for it at all, and it was weird that had no buffs attached to it, which was strange. And even same with Volcano, it was just I cast Volcano. It was weird. There's a miracle. Weirdly, you think that would be quite a big, like maybe do it only if a Volcano pops. That would have been quite fun. Like, it was interesting. It was just like fuck it, a fucking field-sized volcano. I didn't even, there's over a DN test.
It seems a bit wild, really. The whole miracle system, doesn't it? It seems like it's spells, but free and without any risk, only reward.
I think they think that metal is more precious, but if you spec for like 3 metal,
fight 3 metal, it would have been bonkers from the start. Like that would have been just silly.
I will maintain though. I think Soulbound, it gives you so many options.
I agree.
So many options, and you're not forced into a class. Your classes are a canvas. And I think that's great in some ways, and obviously it has drawbacks too, right? Like sometimes some direction is good, but if you take it to the obvious comparison of D&D, I think it makes D&D look like a child's pamphlet.
That having been said, Wiley, because I think you've sparked quite the discussion on this point the last 10 minutes or so.
Seems so.
Why do you think that? Because you said that Vardy really did not give you the same. For some reason, you didn't end up at the same Sunlit Upland of having used the tools to create to like make skills and mechanics for the character you imagined. That happened for you with Storm,
Zuriel.
Surge,
Stormwick.
Why did
I had this exact conversation with Olly at the weekend, so I have an answer. And the answer is, I saw the creations that you could make as a Dwarven. Really great system. Again, you can build basically any weapon you want. You can design it. You pick its features, its range, its extra things that it does. And I'd envisaged a character who would be rocking up every few sessions with a new contraption that would be fun and interesting and different. But actually, they take an endeavor or two to make. And I never actually got to make one. So the variety that I had planned, it never came to fruition, which was a real shame, because you do have less options as a ranged shooting character inherently. So when they didn't materialize, that was a bit of a shame, really.
Same with the spells with Zuriel. He was able to make the spells because he had the endeavors to do so.
Yeah, that was one of the things. Actually, just there was no downtime really in the adventure because of how it was designed, and I think Soulbound benefits from using its own features, of which endeavors are quite an important one.
Yeah, my favourite part of Wang was doing the intermission sessions where you got to talk to Perkins and do your leveling up montages. That was always really fun and off the cuff and stuff.
Yeah, I don't think we really explored our characters very much in that way in this campaign.
No,
which is a shame. We had that time. We got to know him, but not quite in the same way as in some previous editions.
Well, to conclude, it sounds like we like Soulbound. Happy to leave it for a bit. Blackened Earth could have been better. I think, would we all agree we preferred Shadows in the Mist? Yeah.
Yeah.
Overall, yeah.
Okay, nice. Well, I think that brings our review to a close.
I'll just say that, but it goes to show that even though imagine if you just watched this episode, you'd think these guys must have hated the last 3 weeks. We passed, didn't we, everyone? Like, it's a testament to the crew, right? Like, it was, the overall campaign was clearly a bit substandard, but that didn't really dampen the enjoyment as such. So it's good to be critical, but we had a lot of fun, and that's kind of all it's about, really. So
yeah, and I think because the next game we play, the next sort of system we go for, is going to be quite different. It's going to be quite narrative focused. So we'll probably have a offline chat at some point between now and then where we will talk about it. Because I want to make sure you guys are on the right foot with that as well. Because shake off the cobwebs of the published adventure.
Feel free to share any information as soon as possible. I'm very excited to get into it.
I promise to be as chaotic and disorganized and disruptive as possible.
Wouldn't expect anything less.
Nice.
Make new characters for the first time. Well, actually, Daryl made a new character because his died, but we're going to make new characters for the first time in 8 months.
I know.
That'll be exciting.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
And chat wants much more role playing. Presumably
I heard chat wants more brummies.
I think we've had role playing in previous campaigns.
A lot of things.
Look, if we do any sort of gang related role playing, I will bring the brummie because I live with one and I do it anyway.
I need to get a better voice for next time as well.
Yeah.
Maybe pick one that you like.
I can't even imagine.
Well, Milo needs to pick a new voice as well, so maybe you can make sure that you don't pick the same one.
Don't clash. I've run out of regional accents that I can do, so I don't know where
Or
we're
you
going.
do have the same one, and then we can compare.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
oh.
I actually try while reading through books to Ellis. I trial my voices, so I'm doing more just pitches and tones. I'm workshopping a few.
Nice. All right. Well, sorry, Cubicle 7. Try again next time.
Good luck.
It's not bad. You could just use some work.
Yeah. Please still send Alex free stuff, even if you don't like us.
Yeah, that would be great if you could. I really am very grateful for the campaign, regardless of any deficiencies, partial or extensive. It's just it's probably a testament to how good our overall group experience has become, that I never remember how long campaigns have been going. It's just it's very, very ingrained at this stage, and an expectation. No pressure at all, but I sort of have this conversation quite a bit at work when we're sort of trying to polish an already shiny SEO gem. It's like we're just kind of, this whole argument for the last hour and however many hours has been 2 hours of complaining about aspects of how the experience played out from a pre-written adventure, is how much of the top of the last 10% of awesomeness can we get out of it, because it's that good as a baseline these days with us. And that's really nice. I think even when our RPG stuff is a bit rubbish, it's still great.
Yeah. And again, I do genuinely feel like Soulbound has a lot of potential, and that's why it's frustrating. Because if I just felt like it was bad, then I wouldn't really care. To be honest, I'd be like, just that's what there is, and that's it. But there is a good foundation. There's a very, very good foundation, be it the game, be it the campaign, and that's why it's frustrating, because it feels like it could be so much more, but it's just not, and it's a missed opportunity, and that's worse than if it were just to have been a bad game, a bad campaign, because then you're just like, fuck it, it's just not good.
I mean, I would love to have made my own campaign. I think that the tools it gives you are really good to create your own stuff. But I still would have used that faction system from Dungeon World. So I still maintain that's the best system for a role-playing game, because having that open world makes it a lot more interesting as a player and a GM. So I think that's what I want to go into next, where you guys are impacting a living world, and I don't know what's going to happen session to session.
That's going to be fun.
It gave me two of my favorite notes back to back. Only if you're an Arrested Development fan, but it's when we were in the tower with Astrid. I just wrote down Astrid corny, Michael, which is a fantastic Arrested Development quote, which led straight into had a hinge off. So if you don't know about Daddy Horny Michael from Arrested Development, then you missed out. But I just wrote that back, and I just thought, why the hell did I write that? And then I remembered. So, but they were back to back. That was great. That tower was great.
I think I just remember you getting very, very salty about not being able to do what you wanted to do with the hinges.
With the hinges especially, and the tornadoes. That's why I like trying to break the rules. I like pushing up against the boundaries and seeing where the resistance is. It's quite fun to hit the thing.
Laws of reality.
Yeah. When there is no reality, but I want it all to make sense, even though it's all in our minds. It's quite fascinating to get lost in a discussion about stuff that couldn't be real, because we're all invested and we're all there thinking we all can see it. It's really interesting to kind of talk about it as if it's real, and then suddenly it's just all made up. I think that's a testament to it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like, at least from my point of view, the most fun that you've personally had, Mikey, playing a character was the priest.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
last
it definitely showed.
and both were morally questionable characters for sure, so that definitely says something. Whereas
Yes,
I'm
it does.
someone I don't play bad characters in like Mass Effect and stuff, but both those characters had a lot of capacity for evil. It was quite
I think
So,
they
no.
both have the same trait, which is what D&D would call chaotic, but also what you would call as selfish,
That is lawful. What is it?
self-serving.
No.
But it was nice because there were moments where they like you said, Molasses had to save people. It was quite fun for me to kind of roleplay that, like
Yes,
kind of almost like
I
felt
liked.
weird, good, but kind of felt
Yeah.
kind of like it was.
I liked how
And
you had a
extremely reluctant hero.
you had a
exactly.
goal, you had a heart all along. Yeah.
Yeah, a heart of gold and coal. Like that's maybe I'll try and pull that off. Well, that so we what? Sorry, are we playing? We're playing Blades next, or is that what we're doing?
Well, that is the plan. I mean, we'll have like a sort of a session 0 at some point, but the people watching the Blackened Earth review don't need to know about that unless they want to continue watching the channel, which hopefully they do.
I think they do, though, right?
Come with us.
What?
Hopefully they enjoy it for us. They're not Soulbound stands.
It'll be good
Yeah,
to
like
have
us.
that mix of evil people doing a good. Yes, Suicide Squad, isn't it? It's great. Like it's evil idiots, but they kind of have to do the right thing to save things, but they will generally fuck it up in some way. It's it's not a bad.
That is fun.
All right, guys. Well, we'll end it there. Overall, I say positive. Yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah.
I started 6.
We like each other, so that's what
I
counts.
was going to say 3 out of 5, which is a 6. So yeah, that's.
Oh wow, I was gonna say like 4 of us, but well, 5 if you include Laurie. But okay, you mentioned just 3 then. If you want to be that way.
No, I meant a score 3 out of 5. Not I only liked 3 out of 5 people. That'd be rude.